Hi there, this is Alan Gordon, astrologer out of Atlanta. So I've been doing a pretty large study of all of the transits from January 12th with the Pluto-Saturn conjunction all the way up to when Pluto comes back around to the natal Pluto of the U.S. chart, which is actually February of 2022. So it's quite some distance. And I thought I'd give my little 2 cents in on the current retrogrades up through August. We have Jupiter retrograde and Saturn retrograde in mid-May, and then Venus has gone retrograde in Gemini. And just an aside, this Venus, Moon in Gemini, Node in Gemini, Venus retrograde in Gemini, has been acting like a Gemini Mercury retrograde. Everything's breaking down. Ice maker's breaking down. This is not quite working right. Lots of irritants. Had to throw my dog out because she wants to walk back and forth during the video. At any rate, so when I was looking to get a meaning for these retrogrades, even though I, of course, know the book meaning, retrogrades aren't always that easy to delineate, unless, of course, you have the person there in front of you. You know their issues. You can help them figure out how the retrograde might ask them to look at these issues in a different way. That's all very personal. But to look at a society is a little bit different. So I was watching some other astrologers' take on it, and it seemed to me, although both insightful and in terms of nuts and bolts, actually looking at the timing of the transits, there was some insight, but it was remaining vague. So I started to look around to some other ways of getting some insight. I ran across Martin Schulman's Karmic Astrology. This is a book on retrogrades and reincarnation. Now, he puts them into phases. He's one of these theoretical astrologers that I don't always agree with. But I think looking at the transit of Saturn retrograde in Capricorn did actually trigger some ideas for me to explain it. What that is going back into the past and digging up what is worthwhile and what's worth bringing forward and what's worth working with. Now, as I said, this transit has got to be a double-edged sword. So on the one hand, the time period from January, February, up until May was us developing ways to deal with COVID-19, or actually SARS-CoV-2 is what it's formally called. And so up until then, up until mid-May was, even though Saturn and Pluto are in the last degrees of Capricorn, this was still new, and this was developing ways of dealing with it, and throughout all world governments. So now with the retrograde, we know what to do, per se. We have a lot of tests out there. We have to disseminate those tests. We know social distancing. We know the masking. But with the retrograde, of course, people stopped doing it. So that was pretty predictable. People are going to come out. They're going to party. It's Memorial Day weekend. They want to go to the beach. They're all ignoring social distancing. And as a medical professional, that bothers me, but I have to understand that most people are not medical professionals. And so they're just dealing with it on the level that they can deal with it. What will that bring? Well, of course, more cases. When, though? Well, there's a 2-week incubation period, and there's another lag time in data. And so it probably won't be another month until we know for sure whether the virus mitigated itself with the summer weather, or whether it's risen again. I suspect it will rise. Maybe not as much as dire predictions, but it will stick around and rise, I suspect. But the other good side of the retrograde kind of came out of Face the Nation this morning. One of the doctors there was relating how very similar the research is to SARS-CoV-1, which is the respiratory disease. I have forgotten when. Back in the 70s? No, much more recent. Anyways, I'll look that up. But apparently, to go forward is not going to be remaking the wheel. It's going to be modifying the research they did on SARS-CoV-1 and modifying it to COVID-2. So, or 19 as it originally was called. And so it looks like we may be in for some trials throughout the next 4 months. And so as we get to that September time when everything starts to go direct, it is very likely that we will have at least some degree of testing done socially. On the other hand, as things go direct, we'll know for sure whether we're going to stay open or not. I suspect not. I'm in 2 Renaissance festivals. Many of my colleagues are in Renaissance festivals. We're going to be the last to open in terms of big crowds. We're all losing out on that. That's where I do most of my astrology. But that has to be right now. And as many astrologers will tell you, we all knew that the Pluto-Saturn conjunction of 2020 was going to bring dire circumstances. We just didn't know what, and it didn't look like it was happening because the economy was going strong. So obviously in the next 3 or 4 months with these retrogrades, we're going to be rebuilding the economy on a different basis. That's obvious. You know, to me, I'm not saying much of anything other than confirming that the direction that people are taking now in terms of reopening the economy, rebuilding the way we do things, trying to keep social distancing but failing at it, all is what the retrogrades bring. It's kind of a no-brainer. So the biggest issue, I guess, is waiting until all these planets start to go direct in September. However, then Mars goes retrograde in Aries. And so we go into the election season with lots of anger, lots of resentment, maybe much more infection with COVID. We don't know. Probably pretty much all the experts are predicting that. I would go with what they're saying, plus what the direct motion of the planets would bring. So all that leaves for the very short term, besides this dreaded Venus retrograde, which is opposite my natal Mars, so it drives me nuts in a lot of ways. I won't go into those, but we have what's coming up is the Mars in June, the Mars Neptune conjunction, and that's mid-June, which is around the 13th. So a lot of fake news, a lot of lies, a lot of innuendo, more out of the White House. I suspect we won't see anything new there. I had finished another study on Neptune and Mars and fake news because that was the 1692 and 93 period of the Salem witch trials. And obviously magic and demons and devils and witches were flying everywhere, dying everywhere actually. And not surprisingly, the spring of 1693 ended the witch trials, and coincidentally Mars was conjunct Neptune in Pisces, and what was going around in the sermons of the preachers was an admonition to forgive each other and to let this go and to rebuild their humanity and their societies. So let's hope some of that goes on this summer without the negative sides of Neptune, which could be mass disease. Although that doesn't really follow in my study on pandemics, which is a different video. But in the last 15 pandemics, Neptune was in Pisces only 3 times. But like I said, that's another video. Have a good rest of the Memorial Day weekend, and let's forge forward.